McCall. I am the Advocacy Director for AARP here in Washington State. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this webinar with our special guests, Congressman Adam Smith and also Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. Both of our members of Congress are here today to share with you some great information, some great news related to the Inflation Reduction Act that was just passed by Congress and also signed by the president. AARP has been advocating for this piece of legislation for more than 20 years to really give Medicare an opportunity to negotiate for prescription drug prices. And we know that that brings down the cost of drugs, not only for Medicare recipients and Medicare Part D utilizers, but for everyone over time. Here in Washington State, AARP has about 900,000 members, roughly in each district. If you do the math and divide by 10, we have about 90,000 members in each of the congressional districts. And it's my real pleasure to be here because we have such a great collaboration with the partners who are putting this event on today. We have Aging and Disability Services of Seattle, King County, which do tremendous work in providing resource and support to our seniors throughout Seattle and King County. And then also the area agencies on aging, which span the whole entire state, but also have an incredibly vital service here in Seattle and King County. So I am just pleased to be joined by them today. We have been working together collaboratively for years and have such a close relationship because we know through partnership and collaboration with our organizations and agencies, we can better serve the hundreds of thousands of older adults that live in our communities. I also have the opportunity today to introduce Tanya Kim. Tanya is the acting director for the Seattle Human Services Department, which serves as a funder and convener and direct service provider for Seattle's safety net. Director Kim leads nearly 400 staff who invest over $500 million in other resources to community-based organizations, including those that support older adults. So again, welcome to the webinar and welcome Tanya Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you all today, and this kind of dialogue between organizations, elected representatives, and community members is so important, and I am grateful for these strong partnerships. We are all here today because we want to enhance the economic security of people in our region, and everyone deserves to have the financial resources they need to stay healthy and safe. And that includes older adults. The city of Seattle is proud to be an age-friendly city since 2016, and we have a long-standing commitment to addressing the needs of older folks in our community. As mentioned, we serve as our region's area agency on aging and regularly get input from older adults who serve on this advisory council and the Mayor's Council on African American Affairs, among others. I know the partners and Congress members on this call share our commitment to serving older adults, and they're leading the way. This is important because there's so much work to do, and we know that many older adults in Seattle are disproportionately burdened by rising costs of housing and other living expenses. This can cause health problems and increase the likelihood of displacement. And racial injustices compound over a lifetime, and older adults of color are more likely to face economic insecurity than their white peers. Seattle is committed to creating a city where all people of all races, genders, income levels, and zip codes can age without fear of economic instability. A big thank you to all of those who are on this call today and for the work that you do, whether you're volunteering, elected, or otherwise, to move us towards this goal. I'm now going to hand it off to my colleague, very wonderful, remarkable woman, Mary Mitchell, who heads up HSD's Aging and Disability Services Division, housed within our department. Mary's team functions as the local, again, area agency on aging, and she leads the largest AAA in our state, serving more than 50,000 adults, their families, and their caregivers. Mary, please take it away.
Thank you, Tanya, and good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this exciting conversation today. As the director of the King County Area Agency on Aging, I am thrilled to be part of such an engaged community of folks willing to show up and take part in these discussions. I also have the honor today of representing the Washington State Association of Area Agencies on Aging. The statewide association represents 13 area agencies on aging across our state. For 40 years, these organizations have been the trusted resources that helps older adults and people with disabilities live healthy, independent, and dignified lives. With this in mind, I'd like to thank the Congress members for their longstanding support of the Older Americans Act. This landmark legislation is the bedrock for so much important work conducted by over 600 area agencies on aging nationwide. We can make a huge impact in the lives of older people, but this requires partnerships at all levels of government and across communities, which is why I'm so grateful that we have partners like AARP, and elected leaders like Representative Pramila Jayapal and Adam Smith. I'm going to introduce both Congress members in just a moment, but first I'd like to outline the structure of today's events. First, I'll share that this is just the second time we've ever done an event like this, so thank you in advance for your grace as we learn and grow together and work through any technological challenges. This is a Q&A conversation with Representatives Pamela Jayapal and Adam Smith. I will ask a couple of questions, but I will mostly be turning the floor over to older adults who live in the Congress members' districts and have personal experiences to share and ask questions about. Both Congress members are welcome to respond to each question, though I will invite the constituents' own representative to speak first. We have a few constituents of both members already lined up, and I'll be introducing each one before they speak. While we won't have time to get to audience questions today, we will provide an email address at the end so folks can follow up later. And with that, we are ready to get started. I'd like to welcome both Congress members to the virtual stage. Hello, it is great to have you both with us today.
Thank you so much, Mary. It's wonderful to be with you all, and thanks to all of the groups, AARP and the City of Seattle and the Washington Association of Area Agencies on Aging for having us here.
Thank you. And Representative Smith?
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. A really important topic, great group of people. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. It is my privilege to introduce you both today. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal represents Washington's 7th Congressional District and is a strong advocate for working people. She serves on the Budget and Judiciary Committees, as well as several subcommittees on workforce development and protections. Congressman Adam Smith represents the 9th Boy, I need to get my nerves out, goodness. Congressman Adam Smith represents the 9th Congressional District and has worked to advance access to economic opportunity, education, and on-job training. He chairs the Armed Services Committee, where he has been an advocate for military personnel and their families. Both of these elected leaders are deeply committed to improving the economic well-being of individuals and families, and I want to personally extend my gratitude for their ongoing work on this issue. Congress members, as you both likely know, many older adults are struggling financially. Over 15 million people aged 65 and above are economically insecure with incomes below 200% of the federal poverty level. The Elder Index paints a grim picture for residents of King County. A single older adult renter in good health can expect to pay $2,946 in housing alone. Women in BIPOC communities are more likely to live in poverty. Can you start us off today by telling us how the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act will help older adults achieve economic well-being? Congressmember Smith, I'm actually your constituent, so let's start by hearing from you.
Sure. I mean, the biggest way is on the healthcare side. As was mentioned in the opening, we finally are allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices, which will help reduce the cost of prescription drugs. And I would be remiss if I didn't, Pramila was a huge part of the whole Build Back Better effort. And we know we want a lot more than what we ultimately wound up with. But what we ultimately wound up with is pretty good. And knowing how to take what's there and available is an underrated skill. And because of that, we're going to have these new reductions in healthcare costs for prescription drugs, also capping the amount of money that seniors have to pay on prescription drugs. This is a huge part of the bill that comes due. Now, there's more that could be done. The original provision that we had to negotiate included a lot more drugs than was ultimately in the final package. And we're going to be right back at this next year to try to move forward on that piece. That's the biggest thing it does, is it helps seniors with their healthcare costs. I do want to just say a quick word on your King County point. There is no more important issue to my constituents, to our constituents, than affordable housing right now. That is driving so much of the cost. So we also, in the American Recovery Act, have a lot of money to go in to support more affordable housing and to support rent support. We have to dramatically expand access to affordable housing in King County. And you mentioned the communities most vulnerable to that, but it's impacting everyone, that cost factor.
Thank you. Congresswoman Jayapal?
Well, I'll just add to what Adam said. Specifically, the Inflation Reduction Act will cap the cost of insulin at $35. He mentioned the out-of-pocket cost cap, which is a big deal, right? Capping that at $2,000. And then the negotiation of drug prices. We have been trying to get Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices for decades. And this is the first time that we are actually going to be able to have Medicare negotiate drug prices. As Adam said, we wanted a lot more. We put in a lot more in the House passed Build Back Better Act, but this is a really important foot in the door. Also, I think, the work that we're putting into climate investments in the Inflation Reduction Act is actually, in my mind, also a healthcare issue and a quality of life issue. A lot of our seniors, particularly BIPOC and, folks who are from marginalized communities, do live in areas where fossil fuels are affecting their health. And so the quicker that we can take on climate change and address get to the goals of really reducing fossil fuel emissions by 40% by 2026 is kind of an amazing accomplishment for us. And that's really what the Inflation Reduction Act will do. So I wanted to call out that. And then also just it's important to our seniors that people are paying their fair share in taxes. And finally, we're going to be getting big corporations to pay a minimum tax and making the tax system more fair across the board for everyone, which of course then allows us the money to invest in the critical investments we know we need, things like housing. We had $150 billion of housing investments in the House passed Build Back Better bill, and we are not going to stop fighting for that as we go forward.
Thank you. And we are so appreciative of your leadership. We have the right Congress members in place to help to move things forward and to keep centering adults, older adults and people with disabilities. Now I'm going to hand it over to one of the Congresswoman Jayapal's constituents, Jim Coe. Jim is the volunteer president of AARP, Washington State. Since he is a constituent of Congresswoman Jayapal, I'll ask her to respond first. Jim, please take it from here.
Well, first of all, Representative Smith and Jayapal, myself and almost 1 million member of AARP in Washington State want to thank you for a great job you guys are doing. We truly appreciate all the things that you have accomplished for the senior community, especially with the prescription drug pricing cap. That is just something that we are very, very grateful to. Now, I'm going to ask a question regarding livable community, age-friendly community. The city of Seattle and Renton in King County is now part of the AARP's growing national network of age-friendly communities. That means that they share a joint commitment to bring their cities as a great place to live for people of all ages. Yet in some part of the city and county, there's a high percentage of senior citizens, but there continue to be limited network and infrastructure to support transportation, health, and social services needed for older adults. For example, transportation, a key component of this, is essential for older adults to ensure they can stay productive, they can socially engage, they can be independent and connect with friends and families and services. Especially many of the older adults are forced to stop driving. So our question is, what steps can we take at the federal level to keep Washingtonians connected to services and provide infrastructures they need to remain active and productive within their community? Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. And thank you for your work with AARP. We really appreciate it. Well, a couple of things. First of all, Adam had mentioned the Older Americans Act. This is really important. It was enacted in 1965, and it includes providing supportive services and home-delivered nutrition services, family caregiver support. Also, the long-term care ombudsman program is in this to keep older Americans connected and supported by their communities. So we reauthorized that bill in the last Congress. It'll go until fiscal year 2024. And in that reauthorization, there are a couple of provisions I wanted to just call your attention to: removing barriers to the aging network and increasing business acumen and capacity building. And then also providing states and localities with flexibility of deciding the allocation of national family caregiver services, which will enable our state, Washington, to direct more of these resources to the largest populations in the state, including Americans over 60. But I also wanted to call out both the American Rescue Plan and the CARES Act, because a lot of people don't realize how much we did on things like transportation, in addition to vaccination, right? The CARES Act provided almost $1 billion to help older Americans, and the Rescue Plan provided about $1.4 billion. So that funding was used not only to vaccinate older Americans against COVID, but also to reopen senior centers, to invest in infrastructure and ensure that seniors were not socially isolated after the pandemic, and also to invest in facilities that allowed for independent living for seniors. And then Washington State received about $16 million for nutrition assistance, and $10 million for supportive services that included home care and transportation as part of the Rescue Plan. And of course, the Rescue Plan put a lot of money into state and local transportation systems overall, which helps our seniors. I think moving forward, we just need to increase those investments, and we need to implement them with an accessibility lens and a racial equity lens. And we just need to also ensure that the effects of climate change, which can disproportionately affect older Americans, are addressed as well. And then finally, I know getting access to air conditioning is so important as we continue to experience these record temperatures. And I was really proud to secure $400,000 in funding for the City of Seattle's renewable energy home heating conversion program that will help low-income households to convert to energy efficient electric heat pumps, which also includes air conditioning.
No, I completely agree with everything Pramila just said. I think it's really important to look at the CARES Act, American Rescue Plan, to see the dollars that were in there. And most of those dollars have been distributed, but there's still some out there. So work with the local organizations and agencies to make sure that that money's getting out there. Also on the air conditioning front, part of the Inflation Reduction Act was to help people buy heat pumps and more environmentally friendly heating and air conditioning systems. So there is a subsidy in there. Yeah, and the support locally. Funding sound transit, incredibly important. We see it all throughout our community going up. That's going to massively increase access for everyone, including seniors, as we complete those sound transit light rail systems and the enhanced bus service. That's really going to be helpful for seniors. Also, in terms of delivering services to seniors, community-based organizations are crucially important. I say the one sort of positive thing out of the pandemic is the way community-based organizations rose up to meet the challenge on providing healthcare services, certainly community healthcare clinics, but also food banks, senior services, a bunch of different organizations, and particularly within discrete communities. The Filipino Community Center, for instance, that works out the Somali Health Board, a whole bunch of different groups that really have the trust and confidence of the communities of color that they can work with. We need to get dollars down to them so they can better provide those services. The Filipino Community Center also, in terms of services for seniors, they just completed, I don't know, 6 months ago, a senior housing unit, affordable housing, right behind their center down there in Southeast Seattle. And there are a lot of other organizations. El Centro de la Raza is looking at building affordable housing down in Federal Way. All of that can be incredibly helpful for seniors. There's a ton of exciting stuff going on. And one thing that both Pramila and I do, earmarks are back in Congress. And yes, I'll call them earmarks. I know it's supposed to be congressionally directed.
Community funded projects.
Exactly that, yeah. But the bottom line is it enables us to support these projects. Africa Town is a project in Seattle that's building community centers specifically to focus on the Black community. I was able to get $2 million, well, $1 million for one, $1 million for to help that project. So we can help support those community-based organizations that provide services to seniors and others, particularly in distressed and marginalized communities. So bottom line is there's a lot we've done. There's a lot we can do. Final point, sorry, is on the Build Back Better plan. And I know this isn't a campaign event, but let's just say, depending on how the elections turn out, we can go back at the Build Back Better plan. And one huge chunk of that was family and medical leave and support for home health providers. Absolutely crucial to enabling seniors to stay in their homes, to have a family caregiver that can then afford to provide that care or to get those outside services at an affordable subsidized rate. Ton of money that was in the Build Back Better plan to help support that. We would love to be able to pass that next year.
Thank you. You know, I just want to take a moment because that was a lot of information, but like seeing the connection to your work at the federal level and then how it has really supported our communities is amazing. So congratulations to everyone, right? Pulling together through a pandemic to make sure that our most vulnerable communities are able to have the resources they need to continue to thrive and live in dignity. So thank you. That was really touching. Now I'd like to turn things over to one of Congressman Smith's constituents, Lorna Stone, who serves on the King County AAA Advisory Council. Congressman Smith, you'll get to respond to this one first. Lorna, the floor is yours.
Good morning, representatives. Like you, we never thought 20 years ago we'd have to be defending Social Security. But now we are hearing stories of the trust fund being depleted by 2035. I think about my friend Pat, whose sole monthly income is an $88 pension and $1,043 from Social Security. She dreams of someday saving enough to visit her relatives in New Jersey that she hasn't seen for 10 years, but just surviving is taking all she's got. Pat has a wide group of friends who so far have been able to pitch in when things get desperate for her. But how many other seniors are just skating by on Social Security? And what about those who don't have friends who are able to help out? Social Security is a primary source of income for older adults, as you know. In 2022, 9 out of 10 people over 65 receive Social Security benefits. The average benefit is $1,669 a month, which represents 30% of the income for most seniors. What are your plans to protect and strengthen the Social Security program for future generations?
Thank you. And the Social Security program is every little bit as important as you describe. You can go back and trace the poverty rate for senior citizens from before Social Security and Medicare to now, and you can see the difference that it makes. There's no program that has taken more people out of poverty in this country than Social Security and Medicare. So preserving and protecting it is crucial to maintaining our support for senior citizens. The simple answer to your question is we get rid of the cap on taxes. As you know, there is a cap on paying the Social Security tax based on income. Get rid of that so that no matter how much the wages are, you pay the Social Security tax, and that greatly helps the long-term existence of Social Security. And then there are also proposals to increase benefits for the lower income earners. There are several bills out there. One scraps the cap, increases benefits, extends the life of Social Security for about 25 years under current projections. There are others that extend it further. I'm a co-sponsor of several pieces of legislation to do that. That's what we need to do to protect Social Security more than anything. It's also worth noting that there are still those that want to get rid of and privatize Social Security and Medicare. So we have to make sure that we stand up against that. That has not gone away. So I believe that Social Security can be preserved if we make those simple changes to it. And we shouldn't give in to the scare tactics that say that, oh, it can't possibly exist. The money can work. Let's continue to support the program. It is the one guaranteed source of income that we want all seniors in this country to have. It was never meant to be your sole source of retirement income, but to have that one baseline to help, crucial. Poverty would go through the roof without it. So we need to preserve the program along those lines.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with everything Adam said. And I want to point out that I always like to make sure people know this is not an entitlement program. This is an earned benefit program. People paid into it so that they could get some security in their older years. And so I think that's a really important point about Social Security. I wanted to also remind people that there was a 5.9% cost of living adjustment that went into effect starting in January of this year. And it increased the average Social Security check by $92 a month. And sadly, I say sadly because we just need to do more than this, but sadly, that's the largest cost of living increase in nearly 40 years. So it's sadly, but also thank goodness we had a cost of living increase. It's the number one thing I hear about every time I do a town hall is the rising costs and the inability of seniors to keep up on their fixed incomes with not enough cost of living increase. In terms of the bills, Adam covered, I think, a lot of the pieces of what we need to do. I have been working very hard with my colleague, Representative John Larson, on moving HR 5723, which is the Social Security 2100 Act, through, and it does increase benefits across the board. It protects against inflation. It increases access to benefits for folks who are disabled and their dependents. And it extends the life of the trust fund by making the rich pay their fair share. It doesn't completely scrap the cap, but it raises it substantially. And the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which I chair, has been really working closely with Representative Larson and so many of our colleagues across the Democratic caucus and pushing for this bill to come to a markup and a vote. Because I think it is really important that we recognize what Adam said, that Republicans are very set on trying to take away Social Security and Medicare. In fact, Senator Rick Scott has clearly stated this as his intention should Republicans take over Congress. And I think we all hoped that these programs would be safe and secure against those kinds of attempts, but that is not the case right now. And we are increasingly hearing calls from those across the aisle to authorize the program for just 1 year at a time, which would create huge instability and insecurity for our older Americans. So those are all pieces, and we're hopeful that perhaps we can try to move that bill forward even in this session. I think it's got something like 216 co-sponsors on it already. So it's really got the majority of our Democratic caucus on board.
Thank you. And yes, challenges ahead, but we have both of you pushing hard. $42 increase in the last 40 years, right? We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. So thank you again for your leadership. I'm going to pass it on to another one of Congresswoman Jayapal's constituents, Joe Haley. Joe is also on the King County AAA Advisory Council, where he currently is serving as our chair. And he is also retired from Congregations for the Homeless in Bellevue. Congresswoman, since he's your constituent, I invite you to respond first. Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you, council members, for being here this morning. I retired in 2020 from Congregations for the Homeless. It's a shelter with wraparound supportive services for men experiencing homelessness in East King County. Over my career, I've seen the high human cost of our housing crisis, which is why I'm here this morning. I met Al several years ago while working at United Way of King County in downtown Seattle. Al panhandled on the corner near our offices, and I used to walk by him every day. One holiday season, I walked by him like I had many times before, but we locked eyes for the first time. I saw the pain in his eyes, and it was a turning point for me. I went back and we exchanged a few words. Over the next few months, I got to know him better, and he even went to church with me, first on an Easter Sunday and then a couple of times after that. Al had his struggles, health issues, drug addiction, a bad reaction to medication prescribed to help him control antisocial behaviors, and incarceration when he stopped taking the meds and lashed out. During incarceration, he'd get back on the meds and get released, and the vicious cycle would start all over again. Being on the street for as long as he had taken its toll, and he was just trying to survive. Older adults are deeply impacted by the nation's housing affordability and homelessness crisis, as you know. Older adult renters in high-cost areas like King County spend a larger proportion of their income on rent than the population as a whole. Older adults who actually own their homes can find themselves house poor and struggle to keep up with costs associated with home ownership. We're at constant risk of being displaced from the communities we call home. And in some cases, we face the real threat of joining the ranks of those experiencing homelessness. So my question for you this morning, and I think you've touched on this somewhat already, but can you describe what role Congress should play in addressing this crisis? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joe. And thanks for the incredibly moving and sad story of Al. And I think it really shows all the different ways in which things come together to make it difficult for people to survive, much less to thrive. On housing, I mentioned that we passed $150 billion in affordable housing and similar investments in the Build Back Better Act. It would have been the single largest investment in housing in the history of our country. And we are not, even though that piece did not make it into the Inflation Reduction Act, as Adam says, if we can get a couple more, expand our majority in the Senate just by a couple more senators, the language is all written, the work is all there, it's ready to go, and we can pass it, and we need to pass it. We also did pass in March a federal budget that included funding for a whole bunch of housing projects that would make a real difference. And I know in Seattle, Plymouth Housing received $750,000 to help preserve affordable housing at the Pacific Apartments. The city of Seattle received $400,000 to retrofit low-income housing to withstand extreme heat events, things like that, that are funds that the federal government puts in that then localities and cities and the state can use to continue to build affordable housing. In July, we also passed the fiscal year 23 Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill, which will expand housing vouchers and rental assistance and new housing in our community. And so that also will bring more funds into projects here at the local level. One other thing I just want to mention is that there is a real role that institutional investors who are posing as corporate landlords have played in exacerbating our housing shortage and our rent crisis. So just over the past decade, these institutional investors have expanded their reach in the housing market, and they now control over half of all apartment units. And that's at the same time that we're seeing these soaring rents that have left families without homes and exhausted their savings enough to be priced out of home ownership. So I know that President Biden has talked about, and I hope we can make this happen, being able to really launch a home ownership program, which, by the way, would deeply help address racial inequity, particularly in the Black community across the country. And so I hope we can make that happen soon. Last thing I want to mention is my bill, HR 3772, which is the Housing is a Human Right Act. And that is really doing what you're talking about, providing kind of the robust investment for housing infrastructure, but also for all of these wraparound supportive services, recognizing that housing is sort of the first and most key piece to everything else. And so I think that is will help us to target our state and local responses around ending homelessness and dampen the role of these institutional investors in our housing market by imposing new taxes on the largest corporate landlords and those who are profiting from speculation. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 unit landlords. I'm talking about people who are actually profiting from speculation in the single family housing market. And then we take that money and we put it into our response to homelessness and creating affordable, permanent, supportive housing.
Yes, I completely agree with what Pramila is saying. I apologize for the noise in the background. I've got a neighbor engaged in a construction project here. So to the extent you hear that, I'm sorry. Look, I think when it comes to housing, I like sort of the mantra that's now sort of grown up in King County about dealing with the homelessness problem, which is housing first. There's 1,000 different other things that go into what puts someone in a difficult economic situation. And I think we have to consider those certainly, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But I think just as a general rule, saying, let us create more affordable housing. And I actually think that the county's doing a decent job of that now. As far as the federal government is concerned, the programs we have, I think, work really well. I don't look at sort of the federal housing programs and go, oh, this is inefficient. They work, that we just need more money for them. The voucher program, the rental assistance programs, the low income tax credit is pure gold in terms of enabling people to build low income housing. So the programs are good. We need to, as Pramila described in the various pieces of legislation we have out there, increase the funding for them to support the efforts to build more affordable housing all across the country, but here in King County specifically. And then I come back to the earlier answer about a lot of these community-based organizations. Plymouth is one of them. They're building an affordable housing unit, a permanent supported affordable housing unit over on the east side, Eastgate in Bellevue. And then there's also in that little complex now another affordable housing unit that's going up, and then a temporary shelter that's going up as well. So there are a lot of great organizations out there that are working on affordable housing projects. We need to support them. Low income tax credit is crucial. We need to find other supportive areas to build more housing. So that there is some place for folks to go. And it is to some degree a volume issue. We do not have enough housing in King County, just in general, of any kind. But then to focus on affordable housing. I think the King County Housing Authority is doing a fantastic job. I visited one of their projects yesterday in Tukwila. And these are rental units where they were able to buy up, I forget the number, a couple hundred rental units that used to be market rate and make them affordable. A lot of good organizations. We need to get them the resources they need to provide more housing. The final thing, and this is not a federal issue, but the county needs to better organize all of these support services. They're out there. I mean, the optimism I feel when I visit, there are a lot of good organizations who know what they're doing. They spend their money wisely. They're headed in the right direction, but it's not terribly well coordinated. And I know that the county council now, Sarah Perry, a new member from just east of me here, is really focused on, it's the Phoenix model. I don't know if Phoenix does this perfectly or not, but they have set up throughout the metropolitan area these one-stop centers where you pick someone up who's in distress, homeless, housing, whatever, and you have a place for them to go where they can be evaluated. Because, like I said, housing first is great, but a lot of people have a variety of different issues, as was described with Al. He had behavioral health issues. So where are the behavioral health services? Maybe there's, economic issue, lost the job, needs to be retrained, whole bunch of different issues. You need to really treat each individual case individually, not sort of lump it into, well, all the homeless are the same. And their services are out there. But a lot of times people can't find them, can't access them. So we need to coordinate that better in King County. And I'm working with the council, sorry, which can occasionally be challenging, but to try and work on how we can better coordinate all of that so that we can have a center to make sure people are getting the services that they need and that they're available. So that's sort of the comprehensive approach I think we need to take. Oh, last point, Pramila is 100% right about institutional investors. I have a bill that focuses on the purchasing of single family houses by institutional investors, which is not yet as big a problem as it is in the apartment world, but they are buying up a ton of what would be considered starter homes for most people and making it more difficult because they come in with cash only offers, waiving inspection, and then it's just massive speculation. It's driving up the cost of starter homes and pricing a lot of people out of the market. And that, by the way, is one of the best ways you generate generational wealth, is to buy a house, and then it goes up in value for it. If you can't, because the institutional investors are pushing you out and you're constantly renting, in many cases you're renting from them, and they're charging you a lot of money. We need to go after what institutional investors are doing to our housing market. And I support Pramila's bill. And I like I said, I've got my own on single family housing units.
Thank you. Yes, a lot of different areas that need to be addressed. And I love the end goal of getting people into home ownership, right? And you mentioned, right, that is the most determining factor of the wealth gap for our communities of color. So now I'm going to hand it over to another constituent of Congressmember Smith's, Zelda Fox. Zelda is another member of the King County AAA Advisory Council, as well as active with AARP. Representative Smith, you'll respond first, and then Zelda, please take it from here.
Good morning to both of you. A few years ago, a member of Congress issued a statement opposing one of the many cuts to SNAP. And in that statement, he said that these cuts to SNAP would eliminate essential nutrition support across the country. And the statement went on to say that this congressperson had observed thousands of seniors, thousands of veterans and children who have relied on SNAP for meals and nutrition. And he also pointed out the concern within his specific district. He said that cutting SNAP by close to $4 billion a year would have a devastating impact. This member of Congress was our own Congressman Adam Smith, and this was back in 2013. And I would just like to point out and thank you, Congressman Smith, for your strong and continuing support over the years for SNAP. And just recently, you supported, and we were very grateful that you supported a 15% bump in benefits of SNAP during COVID-19. This helped a lot of people, as you know, whose jobs were lost or their hours were cut or they lost their livelihood altogether. But as we all know, the fight never ends. In fact, in 2020, there were 5.2 million Americans over 60 who were experiencing short-term or chronic food insecurity. Too many Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans have low incomes. Many of them are disabled. And those are the groups that are most likely to go hungry. But we found that SNAP is successful. It puts food on the table. We know that. The average SNAP benefit right now is $121 a month, about $1.40 per person per meal. But the concern right now is that, as we've talked about already, the rising cost of food. With this rising cost, people are going to have to cut back on what they can afford to buy to eat. Essentially, 48% of older adults 60 and over who are eligible for SNAP, they aren't enrolled in SNAP. And so my question is, as food prices climb due to inflation, what can Congress do to improve access and benefit levels to eligible SNAP beneficiaries?
Well, thank you, Zell. I appreciate that. Number one thing, the Farm Bill is up for reauthorization next year. And that is our opportunity to do precisely what you just described, protect and enhance the program to improve benefits. And, again, I will emphasize that if you have a Democratic Congress, that Farm Bill is going to look a heck of a lot different than if you have a Republican Congress. And we need to make sure that that Farm Bill continues to robustly support the SNAP programs to provide people with access to the food that they need. I think it's also important, again, not to keep harping on the community-based organization thing, but Northwest Harvest and a variety of other folks, we have some incredibly effective food banks in King County. They need our continued support. They coordinate the efforts to provide food to people very effectively. So we need to support them and make sure they can continue to do that work. And then overall, and this has been a theme of our conversation, and the single biggest challenge that we have in this country right now from an economic standpoint is the economic insecurity of so many Americans and the concentration of wealth. We see that around here every day. And certainly it has an impact on a wide range of issues, but the basics of life, place to live, food to eat, clothes to wear, people are really stretched thin and stressed because of that concentration of wealth. We need to look at ways to change that. Just one, not minor example, but one example, the airport workers down at SeaTac. I have co-sponsored a bill to basically require them to get paid more. They have minimum pay at like 17. You can't live on $17 an hour in South King County. And that's what they're getting paid. And this is, the job my father had before that actually was a union job has now been contracted out. It is not a union job and it doesn't pay well enough for people to make it. So focusing on the entire picture of what we can do to help economically distressed people get better pay, get better benefits, universal health care, all of those issues contribute to that food insecurity when people don't have the economic support that they need. Lastly, just a quick word on inflation. We do need to try to focus on that aspect of the problem as well. And that is mostly about the global supply chain and the after effects of the pandemic. Whatever we can do to get the supply chain moving again so we can get prices under control is going to be crucially important. We also have been kind of engaged in a trade war with China for a while, which is not overwhelmingly helpful when it comes to food prices. We need to rethink that. And then, of course, we need to get Russia to stop the war in Ukraine. Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe, but it's actually the breadbasket of a good chunk of the world. So I've actually worked with a number of organizations. We got this agreement to ship grain out even during the war, which is good. It's helpful, but not as helpful as if we could get the Russians out of Ukraine and actually let Ukraine go back to doing what it's supposed to be doing. So all of that contributes to the increase in food prices. But Farm Bill's good a place to start as any. Let's support SNAP and increase it through that bill.
Super comprehensive answer from Adam, but I'll add just a couple of things. when you look at prices, I was looking at this the other day, grocery prices have increased more than 12% over the last 12 months, which is the largest 12-month increase since 1979. And at the same time, food insecurity in older adults has spiked as a result of the pandemic. But eligible older adults are much less likely to participate in SNAP. Before the pandemic, 63% of eligible adults over 50 did not participate, which is why Adam's point about using community-based organizations that are directly engaged with people and can reach people and get them the resources they need is really, really important. The American Rescue Plan provided Washington State with about 16 million for nutrition assistance and for supporting home delivery and congregate operations to connect them with meals. And there is going to be a maximum SNAP allotment increase, automatic increase in October of 2022, but there's a lot more that we have to do. So I'm a strong supporter and a co-sponsor of HR 4077, which is the Closing the Meal Gap Act of 2021. And that would make the standard medical deduction permanent for seniors that receive SNAP and allow them to get a higher benefit. And it would also end SNAP work requirements for states that cannot enroll them in their employment and training programs. And then also HR 1919 is the Improving Access to Nutrition Act, which would allow unemployed adults without dependents to become permanently eligible for SNAP. And, I think we just understand that more low-income individuals would keep food on their tables without the threat of losing their benefits if they're stably employed. And so that goes to Adam's point about all these other things that force people to make a choice between food and something else, name it, right? So between food and your prescription drugs, between food and housing, between food and transportation. And so if we really want to address this in a comprehensive way, we do have to think about universal health care. I, of course, am the sponsor, and Adam's a co-sponsor of Medicare for All. But at a minimum, we did try to get in expanding Medicare benefits for our seniors, adding dental, vision, and hearing. We got that into Build Back Better. It didn't make it into the Inflation Reduction Act. I also think we could lower the eligibility age for Medicare and start to look at some of the things that are making life absolutely unaffordable for people, to the point where they are choosing to not even spend the little amounts of money they have on food, or they simply can't even get to a place where they can afford food. So I think all of those are part of the answer. And of course, reauthorization of SNAP is going to be the reauthorization of the Farm Bill with the most generous provisions possible is going to be really important.
Thank you. And the picture of how the global situations are impacting locally, the importance of having a strong network of community-based organizations is very, very important. So thank you so much for sharing your great work. So now I'd like to hand it over to Congresswoman, one of your constituents, Pamela Williams, who lives in your district. Pamela is a member of the Seattle Mayor's Council on African American Elders and serves as the Regional Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Since we began today with Congressmember Smith answering first, Congressmember Jayapal, you'll take the first response, and I will hand this over to Pamela.
Good morning. Good morning, representatives. It's wonderful to be here. Well, as the long-term care ombudsman for King County, I am very familiar with the Medicaid system. Too many people confuse Medicaid and Medicare and think that Medicare covers the cost to live in long-term care facilities, which we know it does not. But Medicare does provide important health benefits, and some proposed changes threatens people's access to care, which is why I'm here to discuss Medicare. There is no shortage of Medicare plans on the market with different perks and promised benefits. Having worked as a case manager before with the Medicaid, Medicare initiatives, I know how overwhelming it is for many adults to research different options understand what they are signing up for, or anticipate the type of care they will need down the road. Recently, my independent grandmother needed information on how Medicare can help pay for her motorized wheelchair and her diabetic shoes. I was able to help her navigate this process. But what about folks who don't have family members to help and who are rightfully concerned about scams? What can the government do to make it easier for folks to access information and healthcare services? This question is especially for folks who can't afford private Medigap policies.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pamela, for that question. And it's an area that I've spent a lot of time on. I think that, we have such a complicated, confusing healthcare system, and there are so many private companies that are a part of that. I personally don't believe healthcare should be a privatized for-profit endeavor. I think it should be a right that everyone has the healthcare that they need. Unfortunately, these Medicare Advantage plans have become just as confusing and frustrating as other private health insurance plans. So Medicare Advantage plans, which are the private plans that administer Medicare benefits if a person chooses to enroll in one, have increasingly placed profit over patient care. And they do it by doing predatory advertising, by using prior authorizations inappropriately to deny and delay care, and by fraudulently making a patient seem sicker than they are so that they can increase their payments from the government. And these Medicare Advantage companies get away with this by making information incredibly difficult to access. So I have been working for some time on trying to end a program that was started by the Trump administration called the Medicare Direct Contracting Program, which allowed the Medicare Advantage companies to start doing the same things to patients who choose traditional Medicare coverage. And in many cases, initially with the program, before this part was ended, they actually did it without seniors even knowing that they were being moved over to these private plans. So I've met with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services administrator multiple times about this. I've spoken to the White House directly, and I've led letters to CMS urging them to take specific action to stop the profiteering. And Adam has been a great collaborator on this effort as well and signed on. I also led an effort to insert language into the appropriations bill to stop these bad actors in Medicare Advantage. So right now, what I'm urging CMS to do is to stop confusing the prior authorization and the step therapy processes for medical care, stop the fraudulent upcoding by these private plans to increase their profits, and then increase the transparency from these Medicare Advantage plans and crack down on the plans and increase information transparency. So one of the things we are doing is saying we need strict regulation to stop all these deceptive tactics that are used by Medicare Advantage and companies in the direct contracting program. But in the meantime, I did want to say, if anyone needs information or help immediately, you can call 1-800-Medicare, which is the number to the Medicare Ombudsman to get that information that you can't get from your private Medicare Advantage plan. So, and as I mentioned before, I also think we need to lower the Medicare eligibility age and expand Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing. I think these are all critically important pieces for our seniors.
Thank you. And I do want to say, just honoring your time, we are at 11, but I do want to give Congressman Smith an opportunity to respond. And then if you have some things that you want to leave us with, and then back to Congresswoman Jayapal, if you're able to stay and then close us out with anything else you would like to share.
Sure, I'll be quick. I agree with everything Pramila said. I think the for-profit aspect of healthcare creates some just perverse incentives. Healthcare just it's not an industry that you should be engaged in a for-profit business, because the incentives can really, really mess up the healthcare system, which is why we need a universal access healthcare system in this country. And transparency is incredibly important. We've had bills to try to, at least, let you know what the cost is going to be. What's the cost of a service, transparency, as opposed to all the monkeying around that goes. So all of that is absolutely true. The only thing that I would add is something I mentioned earlier, that could be helpful for seniors, is if we had more expanded family and medical leave, if we had more support for home health workers, they could have more support and more help in dealing with that. Because you're right. I mean, just, I went through a significant healthcare crisis myself, and trying to figure out the healthcare system when you're in pain and, it's really complicated. So we need to simplify it and then give seniors more support through family and medical leave, and support for home health providers. And that's really all I have to say. And this great conversation, I think we've got an opportunity to really make progress on all these issues. And just, I want to thank Pramila for her leadership. She's a terrific partner, great person to work with. And you can tell she has a knowledge base on these issues that not every member of Congress has, by the way, on the specifics of the bills, what we've done, what we're going to do. And that's an incredible asset. So I just appreciate the work all of you are doing, and look forward to continuing to work with you and help make progress on these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. And I want to say the same about how great it is to work with Adam. You see, he's been a champion on many of these issues for so long. And we're fortunate to have him also as the chair of Armed Services, a very, very important committee in the House. I am really grateful for all the stories that have been shared and the questions that you've asked. And, this is such an important issue for us to fight for older Washingtonians. So just again, to remind people that with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, for people over 60 in the 7th District could save $13,000 on Affordable Care Act premiums next year. Medicare beneficiaries in my district will save an average of $230 on prescription drugs. And those who are taking insulin are expected to save over $1,400 per year. So we Democrats are fighting for the people. We are fighting to lower costs, to raise wages, to help give people the supports that they need to be able to, as I said earlier, not just survive. Yes, we want people to survive, but we want people to thrive. And there are a lot of things that go into that. And we are really committed to doing everything we can to help. And again, thank you, Mary, for facilitating this today. And thank you to the AARP and the city and all the organizations that have been involved in getting this information out to people so that they know what the benefits are. And we all have a game plan to follow going forward.
And thank you again, both Congress members, for your advocacy and leadership and being here today to hear, direct experiences from people in our community. And we're grateful for your work in DC. Another thank you to AARP and the Washington Association of Area Agencies on Aging and the City of Seattle Human Services Department. And with that, I'm going to close out our program today and thank you to everyone for being here and showing up for yourself and for your community. We have really enjoyed this conversation, as well as the one last month with Congresswoman Susan Delbenier, and we look forward to continuing these type of conversations with you all in the future. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.